This is December 2023, and this morning we're going to talk with Larry O'Neill, mainly about his family and his father, because your dad, Larry, of course, was involved in so many things in Nipigon. And as I told you, when you've got a school named after you, that must mean that you had a lot
did
of
something,
it.
Yeah.
Right, he is worth something. So if you want to start with maybe how your dad got here or that type of thing.
I will.
You got all your notes.
Well, first of all, I'd like to, thank you for inviting us and inviting me to be able to share some of the O'Neill history. As I had mentioned earlier to you, I mean, my father has been passed away about 47 years ago now, so some of my memories are a little foggy. So I did some research, and when I started doing the research, I realized that this is an important project. We start capturing some of the notes. So I have some notes to go with, and I have to put my glasses on so I can see exactly what's going on. So my father was born in 1913 in Delora, Ontario, and Delora was just outside of Belleville, just outside of Belleville, and that's where his parents were from. His father worked on the Grand Trunk Railroad. So it said that he went to Teachers College in Peterborough. So I don't know if it was actually a Teachers College, but so he went to so he got his teaching certificate in Peterborough, Ontario, and his first job was in Marmora, and that's just outside of outside of Belleville. Also in 1936 was where he first started teaching. So he taught there for a year, and then he slowly started to migrate up north. And I don't know. I'm sure it was the money that was getting him to go. So he taught in a couple of the smaller towns right around Sault Ste. Marie for a few years, and then he ended up he come to Beardmore in 1939, and he actually came as a principal in 1939. So at that point, there Beardmore was hopping. All three mines were going like mad. It was a booming place. I checked in some of the history of it, and so he was there, and he was making $110 a month. I found the pace.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, it was $110 a month, and he had room and board. He stayed part-time in the Beardmore Hotel and in another place, and so his room and board was $17 a week. So he wasn't banking lots when he was there.
Wow.
So my mother, of course, had came over from Leighton Buzzard, England, after the war with her mother, and of course they grew up in Nipigon. So she had a friend, and I don't know what the parents' names were, that owned the Beardmore Hotel. So she used to go up occasionally on weekends to work up there, and that's where she met my father. So my father was there. Basically he taught there. I think it was for 3 years. And in 1941, and I knew I talked to you earlier, he got a job with it was a schoolmaster position, is what they called it, for the HMCS Griffin. So he went up and he taught up in Port Arthur. And I thought it was retraining after the war, but it was actually the training and bringing the education level up for some of the people before the war. So he worked along there. And he never really left. So after that, when the war broke out, he moved over and he was working on. He got on the boat, the HMS Puncher, and it was actually an aircraft carrier. Canada didn't own, just their navy was pretty much like it is now, almost non-existent. So they didn't actually own any ships, and it was a ship that was on loan to him from Britain. So he served. He did his time in the service there, and in 1945 he was discharged from the Navy, and he was as a lieutenant when he came out.
So is he still single then?
No, he was married then. So and Bill was born.
Okay.
So Bill was born in 1941, and that's why. So there's 12 years difference between Bill and my next older brother Terry.
Okay.
And I'm assuming the war had something to do with that.
Right.
Along
I
there.
guess so.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, in 1945, he was discharged, and this is where he started coming back to Nipigon.
Okay, one little thing just mentioned though, Larry, is did they always live in that house?
Yes.
And that became a famous, I mean, even now, that's the O'Neill house, really.
Yeah.
Even though it had a name, but that was an amazing house on that corner.
It was, and you know what? I did find some paperwork on that. So, when in night after he got out of the Navy, he came back, and of course my grandmother lived down by the old CN
Right.
station. So he lived there for a while, and he had a job teaching in Red Rock.
Okay.
And so he went from, I think it was January to June of 1946. So I remember my mother telling me, I don't know if he did it every day, but he used to walk the tracks back and forth to Red Rock to teach and then come back again. So
Okay, so yeah, that house will always be known, I think, as O'Neill.
oh, as the O'Neill house.
Yes.
And you know what? There's some history on there's. I have a lot of the paperwork of when they bought the house, and it was quite the schmozzle. That from some of the information I got from reading the lawyer's notes, so he was dealing with Seaman, Blanchard, and Cyander up in Thunder Bay, that I guess deeds and that didn't really get filed all the time. So Hudson Bay was involved in the property. Who did they? So they bought the house off of Gerlach, but it was Fred Sanderson that I
Right.
think the Gerlachs bought it off of. But the Hudson Bay was still on the deed somewhere, and there used to be, from what I can understand when I read on some of the information, that there used to be like a little hospital or a medical center that used to be on that property also.
Right, okay.
And that, so everything was sort of caught up in a schmozzle there.
Because I think across the road also in that old building was hospital or doctor's offices at one time as
Yeah,
well.
it could very well be, yeah.
Right.
So it was Fred Sanderson, I think, that had bought it when it was the Scandia house,
That's right.
and took the top story up, because it used to be 3 stories.
Oh.
So he took the top floor off and then put the roof on it,
Right.
and then it sort of became a rooming house. When we lived in it, I mean, I don't know if it's still like that today, but you could still see the numbers on the doors, because it was sort of raised, on the wood itself. It
Right,
wasn't glued on.
right.
You could go in there, and it was a beautiful little house. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, it got a bypass there, so.
No, that's fine. No, that
Yeah,
was good.
that's
No,
good.
because I did
Yeah.
have some
And then
points on
just
that.
mentioning, Sanderson is worth mentioning. Obviously, that's where Sanderson Street
Came from.
and is named after him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes.
And the only other thing I'd like, so my father paid $1,500 for the house when he bought it, and E.C. Everett carried the mortgage.
Oh,
Yeah, so
my.
I have the note from E.C. Everett, saying this is, he lent him $1,500 and this is the interest and everything else. So it was, it's.
So when you look over at that house, Kirsten, you're going to see lots of history there.
Yeah, there's lots of history there, so
Yeah.
for sure. So in 1946 is where my father started at the school here in Nipigon. Of course, in those days it was called Nipigon Consolidated. It wasn't Nipigon Public, and in 1947, while he was there, that's when they put the addition on. Yeah, so it's almost to the size it is now. They did a couple other additions
Right.
since then. So,
Yeah.
so in 1946, yeah, he started, and he just started as he was a grade 8 teacher, and when he became principal, I couldn't really find any of that information out, but I know it was, he was principal while I was there, so
Right.
it was a
Right.
few years. So
Yeah. So, and people associate him and Anita together because they worked together for so many years. Anita Lang.
Exactly.
That was her one and only job, apparently,
Mm-hmm.
was then. And I think, wasn't it, that each town had their own little board then, and Anita worked as the secretary
for
them.
all of them,
So
yeah. Yeah,
people
no, yeah.
connect those two.
And you know what? They had a good friendship
Yeah.
forever.
Yeah.
That they were
Yeah.
part and parcel of that. So which is a good thing.
So did you ever have your dad for a teacher?
No, I never had him as a supply teacher. And of course, he would come in and he used to, in those days, the principal used to come in and watch the teachers and sort of, making sure that they were doing a good job. So I mean, I had him as a fill-in, but I never ever had him, as a teacher. Though I did get, sent up a number of times to the office to have a little chit chat with him, which was always not good, because then I got a chit chat again when I got home,
Right,
which wasn't the best.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and so I say that's where his career became. But he was very active in the community. there was some of the committees I could remember, and there was some things that I found, and I try to compile a list of some of the things that he was involved in. So he was Reeve, he was on the seminary committee for forever. He was on the original hospital board. He used to be on the Red Cross, and I'm going to touch on that a little bit later. Okay. The Red Cross Outpost Hospital, and then he was on the first executive when they changed over to the Nipigon Memorial Hospital. So he was around through there. He was big in the Conservative Party, and I think that's what helped him get some of the work done that got done around Nipigon. He was in the Legion, he was the Masons, he was president of the curling club, he was fire department, he was chief and deputy chief. He was the bookkeeper for the Anglican Church. He was a volunteer ambulance driver. He did reffing. He did the umpiring for the baseball tournaments. He was chairman of the Mills Citizenship Committee when they were trying to get the plywood mill reopened.
Oh.
Yeah. So I have lots of quite a bit of documentation on that. He was emceed for everything from bowling to hockey to weddings, and he was Justice of the Peace.
Was he?
Yeah, he and Johnny Sharp were the two Justices of the Peace, which because there was 4 boys. There was Bill, Terry, myself, and Ian, and then we raised my cousin Ronnie from the time he was basically 8 months old or something. So we had 5 boys. When you walked into our house, you would walk in, and there was a dining room table there. So the police used to come with all their tickets and their charges and summonses for whatever the event. And so my father would sit at the table and sign them all while they stood there. And you always knew when they got to one of the O'Neill boys' indiscretions, because my father would just look over his glasses at one of us that we got charged with something. For some reason, the OPP never brought them to Johnny Sharp. They always came to our house. I'm not sure how that worked.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and of course, and then he was and the principal. And at the same time, as you'll know, Glenn, I mean, the teachers didn't make a lot of money back in the day, so. He was always working. I think that's why he did some of the ambulance driving and the rest of that for some extra income. He worked at the beer store and the liquor store pretty much every summer. I know that I saw some paperwork that he spent a summer loading ties on for the CN rail, that he would be down there doing that. And I have a hard time imagining it, because my father wasn't a really outdoorsy person, but he guided for Gapins.
Did he?
Yeah, for a couple of summers that he would go out and do that anyway. So,
and in these days, teachers can hardly wait for summer to come to get a break. Lots of them don't think about working.
Yeah,
But in your dad's time, of course, with that amount of money, you're looking for a summer job, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Because today it's summer's here and I'm going to relax or something.
Yeah.
Not very many.
Because no, you would know better than that. I remember hearing conversations, because I think couldn't you take your pay over just the 10 months or 12 months or whatever?
Yes.
So I think my father used to take it over the 10 months, so you really needed that to work on the other 2 months to get out there.
Yes, that's true. That was that was good.
Yeah, so anyway, I said I would touch on a few of the highlights. So while he was Reeve, and this was one of I remember having conversations about that with him. His disappointment when he was Reeve. He was after to get the high school built in Nipigon, and he had pushed really, really hard to try to get the high school built here rather than it going to Red Rock. But the Catholic school, the building of the Catholic school was in the works at the same time, so he needed them to put a hold on it for a couple of years, and then they'd get the high school, and then they could proceed with the Catholic school. But it was a hot political topic at the time, and it didn't go. They built the Catholic school, and then unfortunately the high school ended up in Red Rock.
Do you think maybe the mill was part of that as well, having the money maybe to support the high school?
Oh, I think so, for sure.
Yeah.
They had the tax base there to be able to do that, and Red Rock at the time was hopping, and Nipigon's plywood mill was
just starting. Eh?
Yeah, just starting. Yeah, didn't really have a good future. So anyway, he had worked on that, and I see there's lots of documentation where he was lobbying and trying to get that done. So. And as I touched on earlier, so he was on the original, or he was on, not the original board, he was on the board for the Red Cross Hospital, Outpost Hospital, and I think it became a change of politics or change of whatever. They were starting to defund the Red Cross Outpost hospitals, and the government wanted these hospitals to become sort of standalone and become incorporated. So
Right.
that's how the Nipigon District Memorial Hospital, started. And he was on the original committee when they transferred over from the Outpost Hospital and the new hospital was built, and they went into that one, or not the new hospital, it was the old hospital on, what street is that, Churchill? And
Yeah.
yeah.
So, am I right that the original outpost was in that little building that Linda Harbinson
Yes.
now lives
Yes.
in? Now that little house that actually housed many different things over the years, but it's by the fire hall.
Yeah,
and
there's
that
Hal
was-
Frank was in there and everything after that.
Right,
yeah,
right,
yeah.
yeah.
And so the original executive was Henry Swain, Doris McGinnis, and Johnny Sharp, and my father was the chairman. So
Wow.
yeah, so it was that was one of the, I guess, highlights of his career too.
I guess so.
Yeah, and then of course he was chairman of it was called the Nipigon Citizenship Committee, and that was in 1968. And so my father was the chair of that committee, and what the goal was to get the plywood mill at the time reopened. It had shut down for a number of years before that.
I'd forgotten
Yeah,
that,
they had
yes.
lost they had lost some of the contracts, and so they set up a committee to try to get that back. I say again, I have a fair amount of correspondence on that.
And it ended up with a lot of employees involved in it.
It ended up, so what they had to do is they had to, for the township sort of commitment, they had to come up with about $115,000. So part of the committee's job was to get people to pledge the money to get it back up and running, and that was what the government wanted. If you could get up to that $115,000, and then they would work with a business development bank and maybe some funding from the government and the rest of it. So they ended up actually forming their original, I'll call it committee or business group, to be able to work on behalf of the plywood mill and the citizens to be able to get it up and running. And a lot of it was prominent businessmen. Elgar Wright was on the original sheriff, Florian Zechner.
Okay.
Yeah, Murray Atkinson.
I was going to say.
Yeah, Murray Atkinson, and that's where, of course, Ken Buchanan got his start. So he was involved in that. So
Right.
there's quite a few of them. I know that if you go back into some of the history, that they're saying that there might have been some insider trading somewhere along the way, and then when the shares got bought, and then Kenny Buchanan and the rest of those guys sort of took over the mill and ran with it. But it was
So Bill Harris was the first one, if I remember correctly, when the mill started. But I do remember Buchanan, because I thought Herman said he lived on Green Mantle at one time.
yeah,
That's interesting.
yeah, it could be. I've always known the Buchanans from the Red Rock Road. I didn't
Yeah.
realize that he was
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
Nipigon. So yeah. So anyway, they got
And
that
we're
up and running.
fortunate. I mean, we're fortunate in the end that your dad was one of those that pushed for that, because the plywood mill ended up as a very important part of Nipigon.
Yeah, and of course the other thing was, I think his ties with the Conservatives Party, and the Conservatives were in power. He was able to get,
It's all political.
yeah, a lot of he had the connections, and of course George Wardrope was the person at the time, and I see a fair amount of correspondence back and forth between them, and I can't remember what his title was, Mines and Resources maybe, and
Right.
so he was the go-to guy, and being from Thunder Bay was a good thing. So
Okay, we'll pause right there while she
Yeah.
resets the camera. Because George Wardrope, his name was well known around here.
Yes.
I can even remember myself him coming here very many times. Like, he was well known around here
yeah.
and well liked. So
He was
Yeah,
a
he
people
was well.
person. I can remember, as a very young age, him coming, to the house and he'd always have a candy or something for us, and when he came in and to meet with my
very
father.
well known, that's for sure.
Yeah, and when I talked to some of the older people, of course, we had a family cottage out at Pauley, and when I talked to some of the people who'd been around there forever, they said it was I don't know what year it was, but they lost the bridge going into Nipigon or into Pauley Lake.
I got pictures of that one.
Yeah, and a lot of people say that it wasn't for my father at the time and some of his connections that they would have went at least for a full summer, but they were able to get a Bailey Bridge across there quickly and get it so everybody could enjoy it. And I can remember that walking in basically from the highway,
Same here.
And to get in there. So
well, to the Girl Guide camp, we end up with wheelbarrows. So we could take everybody's things back and forth across. But fortunate that you're right, that we got that bridge pretty quick.
Rather than so.
Your dad had that camp a long time, Larry, right?
Yeah, he actually, when he bought the property, there was 3 pieces of property. He bought a block and then they subdivided it, and Dr. Farley had bought one off of him, and so he and Bill Marchant from Red Rock had bought the other one. I don't know what, and our camp stayed in the family for Terry has it now, so. Forever, and the other ones have changed hands, umpteen times.
But mentioning Dr. Farley was a dentist, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I remember that name.
Yeah. So.
Anyway.
Mm-hmm. And so I guess one of the other, feathers in his cap, of course, when the Nipigon Curling Club got condemned, the original one, that was one of the few sports that he actually played on a regular basis. He won a number of titles in the Legion curling, so he was a sort of an avid curler. So when the old curling club got condemned and they had to build a new one, he took over as the president of the curling club, and they went out and again did the fundraising and the walkathons and arranging for free labor, and got the Winterio grant, because in those days used to be able to put in-kind work back to it, and so they went out and did that and got it built. And unfortunately he never got to play a game in there. He passed away before he could. He passed away the year it opened, so he never got to do it. But again, there's lots of correspondence on that. Dealing with the different levels of government and trying to do it. So that's why I think this is good, to do this, and hopefully some of the younger people, watch some of this stuff and realize that, there was a lot of hard work that went into a lot of things in Nipigon. Let it be the Nipigon Arena, the pool, the curling clubs and everything else. It wasn't just because
and you think of the volunteers that year, those 2 years for that curling club, was a lot of volunteer work. To build that. I just even remember.
There's pictures at the curling club, when they were building it, and the guys pushing the gravel and digging and putting all the piping into the ground and digging it all by hand and filling it in, and
I recently looked at some pictures, and Herman and I were like, what are they doing? And you're right, they were digging holes to put the footings in there. You're right, all by hand. There was no machinery in there.
I know when I went over to the curling club last year, and there's all that memorabilia that used to be on the wall was just taken off the walls and thrown down the stairs, and I'm thinking, oh, geez, this isn't right. You've forgotten. That's right. You've forgotten. It's a good part of the history, and all of it, and the
hard work.
And I think that's why this is a good project to be able to get there, and hopefully the younger people sit down and say, hey, I'm enjoying the labors of somebody from 1976 or 1977, and same can be said for all the people who did all the work for getting the new community center work.
The same with the way we got the arena and the ice plant. I just recently came across a little article where they started to raise money for artificial ice, and then for a Zamboni and all those things, and the kids take it for granted now, and that thing runs around the rink, and But you got something there, and your dad's the fire chief?
Well, just it's the fire chief part is is foggy to me. Though I know that he was deeply involved, and he was a member of the first fire department when the fire truck used to be kept just up the street from us in the town office, and we had fire phones that was in my father's bedroom, so there was a fire would ring on just certain houses in
Right.
I don't know if it was the upper echelon of the fire department that got it, and the kids would all run. You had to pull up the button if you wanted to talk, and they'd tell you where the fire was, and then we had a list of firefighters that we had a phone. If my father wasn't home or my mother, would do it. So I have a hat that was his from the fire department, and it says deputy fire chief on it. So I don't know if he was ever fire chief or just went as high as deputy. But it seems like he might have been fire chief when it was in the old town office. But when it sort of moved up the hill into the rest of it, then he was just a deputy there, or maybe he had stepped down a little bit.
Him and Dick Went were both at the same time.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So it's hard to tell.
Hard to tell. Yeah.
They were both very active at the same time.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know that. Well, again, my mother used to say that she spent more time. Of course, he would be at school, and the fire would go, and he'd come home with burns and suit jackets and everything else. He spent more time patching up the stuff than it was worth for that couple of bucks they got as a volunteer fire department. But,
Well, I suppose your mom was on the call then. If he's working, she's phoning.
She's the one, yeah. And
Right.
I wanted to mention that because it's I think it's in every family of people who are involved in the community. There's a reason they are, because somebody else is picking up the slack, and my mother was always there. My father being a teacher, I can never remember him ever sitting down and helping with the homework. It was always my mother. It was always my mother that would help, with the projects and the math and everything else. And my father, was at a meeting generally somewhere,
Right.
And she's sort of the the unsung hero. I mean, she's the one that made it possible for him to go out and do everything that he did do. So
Yes.
yeah. So no. Anyway, that's pretty much all I have. I say my oldest brother Bill, who passed away unfortunately in 2008, was sort of the family historian. So a lot of the information that I got was from stuff that he had saved and then got
Right.
passed down to me, and some of it is from memories. I know when I moved back to town and started getting involved, and of course a lot of the people were more senior than I am, I'd get lots of stories about my father and how he taught, and he was definitely well respected. Everybody knew he carried a yardstick or a pointer. That
was it, up and down the hall.
Oh
with the yardstick. You're
You'd be
right.
trying to get your boots on to go outside, and you'd get swatted about 3 times before you got your boots on. But he was well respected. I mean, he told people the truth. I don't know if they always liked that. I can remember sitting at our supper table and the phone would ring, and I'd only hear one side of the conversation, and it would be something like, "Well, if you're not going to discipline your kids, we will," and that would sort of be the end of it. And so I believe he was fair. He was involved in the community, and he always had the community in heart. And even when he passed away after he retired, he had just got elected as for the school board, because there was always some things that he wanted to push through that he
Right.
didn't have the ability to do as principal. So he unfortunately he never got to see that part of his career through. So
I just remember, though, in his day that, in my memory, is that Red Rock had their own group for the school board. Nipigon did, Dorian did, and then they amalgamated into one. But at one time, everybody had more people involved in the schools.
Yeah.
Now I have no idea who the Nipigon board member is.
no.
Not somebody that you see, but in those days you really saw who was helping with the schools.
Yeah.
You really did.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure when everything got amalgamated. I know that, if we're going up to Thunder Bay for a dentist appointment, there's quite often that we would stop at the school in Pearl, and my father would run in there for a minute and have a meeting. So I don't know how far his boundary went when he became the supervisor, because that's what his title was at the end was supervising principal.
Oh.
Yeah, so he was sort of the head of all the schools. He'd go to Red Rock and Dorian, and I say I remember stopping at Pearl, so I'm assuming he went that far also.
Right.
So
And I just came here 59. It was already Nipigon Public School, consolidated, had already been changed.
okay.
So now, what's your memory of when it became named after your dad?
Well, it became so my father passed away in April of '77, and so it was the following year that that the school board had got a hold of us, and I have some pictures of. It was just my mother Ian and I come to the ceremony where they renamed the school. I have no idea who pushed it. You know, I'm assuming
Lillian.
Was it Lillian? Yeah, yeah.
I would think Lillian and Anita.
Yeah, yeah.
were those
That pushed it, and so
Yes.
it was it was definitely a great honor, and I guess when you put that many years on one school and working hard and trying to keep it going,
And as a community person, I think the whole thing fits together.
Yeah.
Not just the school, but his experiences in the community end up showing up inside the school education.
oh, for sure,
Yes,
yes.
yes.
And I think if the teachers can relay some of that volunteer stuff onto the students, I mean, everything is good at the end of the day, and I people have asked me why I always got involved in different stuff, and I think it's from watching my father.
I was just gonna say.
I mean, you learn from your parents, even, unfortunately, by the time he passed away, I was just getting to the age to realize that he was intelligent, and that he had lots of knowledge to share. So, but yeah, it's a good thing, and I compiled the list, and I'm sure that I missed many things on him, but
But I remember him being on all those committees. Was your mom not on the cemetery committee?
yeah,
for
she
a
was
long
on the
time?
semi. She was on the library, and of
Yes.
course, she was on the Legion Auxiliary and
Right.
all the rest of these different auxiliaries
Right.
that she was
and
on.
imagine the women. I can't remember what they were called. The firefighters. Women always had a group because they were
yeah.
always behind the scenes in fires as well. So
Yeah.
I remember that. Yeah, your mom
Yeah.
was active too. So I mean, you came from a very active volunteering family.
Yes, oh for
Yes,
sure.
you
Yeah.
did. Yeah,
And
for sure.
I say it's all for the betterment of Nipigon, so it was
Yeah.
it was good.
Yeah. So when you look back, your dad was a big part of Nipigon. So you can understand, Larry, why I was after you.
Yeah.
To come and
no,
do this
you know what?
because
Yeah.
It's got to be recorded.
Yeah, and it was good. You know what? It helped me to realize sort of how important this project is. We
Right.
get stuff captured because I say when I started, thinking about it, and I think I had actually sent you a message that was supposed to go to Lisa because she
Yes.
wanted me to come up, and I said no, I'm trying to compile the stuff. So I was going through some of the files that we had there and some of the information, and unfortunately, for I guess for the history part of it, though there's lots online now, a lot from those days aren't, unless it's something you've posted
Yeah.
somewhere along
Yeah.
the way. So,
Yeah, for
so
sure.
there's lots of history that is
So
gone.
just end up with telling us where are your siblings now?
Okay, well, Bill was the oldest. So Bill was born in 1941, so I don't know how old that would make him. 82, I guess, something like that. So he passed away in 2008. He did very, very well for himself. He ended up to be a director of labor relations for Ontario Hydro in Toronto. So he did well. His family, he had a boy and a girl, still live down they live down in southern Ontario. One is in Ottawa, one is in Burlington. They're doing well. The next oldest brother is Terry. He's in Thunder Bay. His family, of course, he has two. Or one is in Thunder Bay, one in Ottawa, and one is right now in Portage la Prairie. He's a helicopter pilot for the Air Force.
Wow.
Yeah, so he's an instructor out there. So and Terry again did very well for himself. He bought and sold a couple different insurance businesses. He started out with Terrace Bay Insurance and then sold it to Canada BrokerLink, and then didn't like working for Canada BrokerLink, so started another one, and then sold that back to his second business. He sold back to Canada BrokerLink too. So he did okay. My youngest brother Ian is up in Thunder Bay. He's retired. He worked at the plywood mill, and after the plywood mill, he worked at the paper mill, and after the paper mill shut down, they went to Thunder Bay, and he got a job at the college.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, he's built himself a camp out in can't remember the name of the lake on the way to Atikokan anyway. So no, everyone's doing good.
Okay.
Yeah,
and you work for Ontario Hydro.
Yeah, Ontario Power Generation
Oh.
at the end of it. Yeah, you know what? But it started out as Ontario Hydro, and I started out on the construction side. So I went to Thunder Bay when they were building the steam plant there, and Barb and I moved to Atikokan, and we when they were building the steam plant in Atikokan, and then I myself, I guess, when we had kids at the point, so I went down to Darlington when they were building the nuclear plant, and Barb was living in Nipigon, and I would just come home, and then I got a job out at Cameron Falls on the maintenance crew, and worked my way up and retiring as the manager. So yeah, we've had and you know what? I think some of it was the upbringing. I think for all of us, the upbringing of my father. I always wanted. He always said that if you stand still, everyone's going to pass you. You know, you got to take a little chances to get outside your comfort zone and try. And I remember having conversation. And you know what? I think in some of it he was a visionary, and maybe seeing the school system. He not once did he ever push any of us wanting to go to college or university. All he said was get a trade.
Yeah.
Get a trade. You know. No sense wasting your money
Well,
and coming out there with a piece of paper that gets you nothing.
He'd fit right in right now.
He
Because
would.
Get a trade is what we're talking about, aren't we?
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's such a shortage of tradesmen now, and so.
Yeah, your dad would fit in with the times of today for
Mhm.
sure.
Yeah. So anyway, Glenna, thank you very
Anyway.
much for inviting me down to talk. I hope I provided some
Excellent.
information.
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.